Okay, welcome to class 8 of our 8 days class called Dayah 7, which which is called Silently Listen, Then Speak with Clarity. This is a very Shema Tishma'u, called it in Hebrew. Shema Tishma'u, silently listen, then speak with clarity. Let's get rid of all the distracting things. Okay, definition. Oh, actually, before we jump in, let's just quickly, just do a very, very quick recap of the first 6 days. The first one is live life, which basically means take responsibility and know that you are in control of your decisions, you are in control of your actions, you are response able. Now that's the beginning. Now, the next day, once you've decided that you're able to respond, now you have to be humble. Yeah, be humble means dismantle that impenetrable egoic wall around you and be make yourself vulnerable. Make yourself available to change. That takes courage and dedication. Once you've developed the trait of be humble, now it's time to know your mission, which means basically knowing your mission. Very important. I should clarify this. Knowing your mission doesn't mean necessarily that you know exactly that you're here to, you know, build this organization or save the kids in Rwanda or whatever to build a hospital in North Jerusalem. It doesn't mean that. It could mean that, but it really means work out your values. What do you think is really important? And that is already a mission. Once you know that you really value honesty, now that will play a big chalik in your mission in this world. And your goal is to be a beacon of honesty, etc. Okay, we said that your values times your passion times a need, something that's lacking in the world, that will actually lead to a specific mission. But that takes time, and you'll find your skills develop over like I'm 45 now, and it's only things have only really started to come together now. So I've had 45 years of kind of just do it not really knowing what's going on. And now it feels like things are kind of coming together a little bit. It's like we have I forgot his name, Kessin or something. He's very deep, by the way. You know that guy? Of Kessin, he's very deep. And he said that yeah, it's like a game of chess. When it comes to Geula, it's a game of chess that at the beginning, when you're watching a master play chess, you have no idea what's going on. By the end of the game, the moves at the beginning that he did that didn't make sense, they start to make sense. They all start to make sense. So so that's how it was. When you get closer to the finishing line, you start realizing how everything really comes together. So that's
You,
know your mission. So Jonathan,
you-
yeah.
sorry, can you give a specific example? Like you said, honesty, then that leads into another mission, or can you give a specific example?
No, I mean if you really value honesty, if that's a real value to you, then part of your reason why you're in the world is to bring more honesty to the world. You understand? If you value honesty, then you obviously would like the world to be a more honest place. So there you go. That's a mission in a sense. You got that?
How's that? How, like, if there's a specific example of how that has led someone into a specific action,
To what? Sorry.
into a specific action. So, for example, going from honesty to building a chesed organization, or like, where are the steps that led that way?
Oh, I'm not gonna. We're just doing a recap now, so I'm not gonna get into that now. But maybe we'll talk about that when we see each other. Um, Shalom Natan. So once you know your mission, now do what matters. This is probably the hardest one. Do what matters is not so much courageous, it's more like do what matters. Work out what doesn't matter don't do that, and work out what does matter and do that. Do what matter basically means be aligned with your mission. Okay, so that's the first four dayas, which is live life, be humble, know your mission, do what matters. That is called self-mastery. If you are holding in those four dayas, you have become a master of the self. You're doing really, really well. Bein Adam L'Chaveri. Bein Adam L'Atzmai. Okay, now the next four is Bein Adam L'Chaveri. So the first one we said is recognize the other, which is the beginning of obviously a relationship, because if you don't recognize that another person exists outside of you, then and that's not a simple thing. That is an accomplishment. That's the beginning, obviously, of any relationship with somebody else is to believe that they exist. Yeah. Then we've got same team mindset. Remember that you guys are we're all on the same team. All of us, even the animals and the plants and the rocks, the other human beings on the planet, and Kolshagain, Achas Kama every year as well. And then all your family, especially your wife. If you can, that's a big, that's something to work on, is developing your same team mindset with your wife. She's really Bein Adam L'Chaveri. That's really where Bein Adam L'Chaveri is at, is your relationship with your wife. And the final day, which I've called harmonize, which in Hebrew is Shalom Bayis. And all of this is really leading to Shalom Bayis. That's the whole point of all of this. Okay, so same team mindset. Now, what is the, so to speak, technique? Well, I don't like calling it that. What is the technique that allows you to um, to really put into practice the same team mindset? And that is this: Shema Tishmo, silently listen, then speak with clarity. Silently listen, then speak with clarity. Okay, definition: to deeply understand others beyond their words through inner silence, and only then respond with clarity and confidence. It's a bit of a mouthful, but I think it's all there. To deeply understand others beyond their words through inner silence, and only then respond with clarity and confidence. Okay, reverse definition. Excuse me, failing to truly hear another due to over attachment to one's perspective, assumptions, and experiences. Failing to truly hear another due to over attachment to one's perspective, assumptions, and experiences. Okay, affirmation one. I listen deeply to others beyond their words with an inner silence, which is outwardly expressed as patience and empathy. I listen deeply to others beyond their words with an inner silence, which is outwardly expressed as patience and empathy. Affirmation two. Only after I have deeply understood the other will I courageously and precisely articulate my perspective. If we internalize these, we are in such a good place. It's unbelievable. The wisdom in these ideas is so deep, so true. Affirmation two again. Only after I have deeply understood the other will I courageously and precisely articulate my perspective. Affirmation three. I generously provide psychological air, creating a safe space where others feel truly understood and valued. We'll explain these ideas as we go along, B'ezrat Hashem. I generously provide psychological air, creating a safe space where others feel truly understood and valued. Like I think Benjamin Franklin once said, I don't care how much you know until I know how much you care. You can't help, no one cares what you've got to say unless they actually feel cared for by you. Until somebody actually genuinely feels cared for by you and valued by you, you can even say loved by you. Yeah, they don't care what you have to say. They couldn't care less what you have to say. Okay, so I'm just going to read through it very quickly again. Okay, this day is called, and it really is all in the title. Silently listen, then in italics, speak with clarity. So we're talking about communication here. Communication is a two-way street. You communicate with me and I communicate with you. That's how it goes. But always let them communicate first. And how'd you do that? With silence. That's true. That's the medium. Silence is the medium that allows things to transfer. Like um, we've said in lots of other contexts, in more Torah Deca classes, that in more like Panemius classes, that dumb, yeah, doim, which means silence, also means dumb, means blood, yeah. Just like silence or stillness allows for a transfer of information, so to dumb, yeah, blood transfers oxygen to the body. It takes from the ethereal, very not ethereal, what's the word I'm looking for? Not abstract, not ethereal. Excuse me, wherever it is. It takes from that very I'm trying to think of the word again. That very abstract realm of outside of you, of air, and it brings it into the body, and that's what blood attaches the air to the body. It attaches the ruchnius to the gashmius. That's how transfer takes place. Daled mem. By the way, daled mem is also from Lashon mida. The backwards is mem daled. Mida, which is the 10 midas, which is the spheres. That's how Hashem, so to speak, interacts with the world. So those two letters, Daled and Mem, are very important. But that's it. Silently listen. Be silent when you listen. We'll talk about that. B'ezrat Hashem. Then and only then, speak with clarity. Remember that speaking is about the other person as much as it is about you. That's very important. That's very important. Thinking is about you. Thinking is 100% about you. Action, doing is 100% about them. Speech is 50-50. It's me expressing myself to you. So I need to know your language. I need to be able to speak your language. That's speech. Doesn't help if I just say doesn't help if I'm just going to speak on my terms. I need to speak according to your rules. It's my speech, but it's your rules. Okay, the reverse definition, so the definition is to deeply understand others beyond their words through inner silence and only then respond with clarity and confidence. Reverse definition, which we fall prey to all the time, failing to truly hear another due to over attachment to one's perspective, assumptions, and experiences. Basically means that there's so much inner noise going on that you're not aware of anything outside of yourself. That's why we've said over and over that the word Russia and Ra'ash, noise, are the same letters. That's why by Purim, one of the reasons we make a lot of noise when we hear the word Haman is that we don't want him to transfer himself into us. When we hear the word Haman, so that because we said silence allows a transfer from him to you. So when we say Hammam, we scream and shout because we don't want any of him in us. We don't want to be Makabal that in any way. Um, Affirmation one, I listen deeply to others beyond their words with an inner silence, which is outwardly expressed as patience and empathy. That this inner silence, what does it look like? It really looks like patience. It looks like endless patience. Only after I've deeply understood the other will I courageously and precisely articulate my perspective. So remember, this isn't just about being silent, this is also about personal communication as well. They're both very important, but you can't have one without the other. And affirmation three, I generously provide psychological air, creating a safe space where others feel truly understood and valued. Psychological air is when somebody somebody just needs to be heard and you listen to them. You're giving them what's called psychological air. It's like they've been trapped in this room, and then all of a sudden you open the window and they like you go under, you go in the mikveh and and then you come out. You've been there for a long time. That gasp of breath. That's what it's like. That's the analogy when somebody finally feels listened to. When they finally feel listened to, it's just like. And I think probably it's important to, not to be negative, but to remember the opposite is usually we're not given that privilege. It's unique people who really listen. It's not the general, it's not the there are people who listen 100%, but they're not the majority. And it's important that we know that because the same way when you want to just say something, you need to get something off your chest, you need to say something, and the other person is not available to listen, it's like you just feel like you want to scream and smash the house down, It's so frustrating. Yeah, you too.
Yeah, a couple things. First of all, it's excellent so far. I find that a lot of times I'm in positions to listen to somebody. It's always in a very noisy environment. It's rare where you're in an environment where you're like, how you doing? And it's always short and quick and moving on to the next. So these, it's just it's how do you put yourself in this position? Call somebody up and let's talk it out, or where is these scenarios taking place? Where are these scenarios?
I'm going to tell you a story. It's a nice story. These kids just got married. My Rav of Faber had twin boys. Um, they must be 21. So they say it's 21 years ago. And I went to the Eliezer, you were there. You went to the bris, maybe. But I think it was before you were connected with Levi as well, or maybe not. Anyway, so I went to the bris. It was a double bris, two kids, two twin boys, and the I was going through this really difficult thing with the shidduch, and it was the Boston Rebbe. The Boston Rebbe was there, I think, was at Sal. And it was so busy with so much crazy. It was so crazy. Like Rev Faber's a big, he's a big man, a big macher. He had, he knows loads and loads of people, and it was just pumping. And I remember the Rebbe, I think he was walking. I can't remember which way he was going. And I like stood in front of him, and he saw that I was going through something. And I can't remember exactly what I said. Something like, Rebbe, I'm going through something really difficult. I can't remember what he said. And it was like everything just went dead silent. It didn't. It didn't. But I just felt like his attention was with me 100%. And it just everything else silenced. So it doesn't actually matter it's if you're there, genuinely there, and maybe you're gonna have to go like this with your ears and lean all the way forward, or turn right, put your ear right to their mouth and close your eyes and put your head down. Yeah, but it's not about it's not about the external world at all, and that can even actually magnify the experience when you're straining to listen, when you're actually having to pay to listen. You know what I'm saying? That can really add something. Yeah. Much ain't when you're sitting there in a quiet room and you're talking to somebody and you're just like, yeah, what do you want to do to that person when they do that to you? They need to answer that question. But just remember when you do it to somebody else. Just 1 minute, excuse me. Come on. So that's the exact opposite. So you could be in a crazy, crazy busy room, yeah, and and the other person can feel absolutely validated and be given all the psychological air in the world, or you could be sitting on by your pool in the garden with with the sunshine and a nice drink, and the other person feels like you've just closed yourself off Montgomery and there's just frustration and incarceration. Okay. Um,
Can I add one quick thing is very practically and a simple level is eye contact. Is I've had people tell me in the past that like there could be a party or something going on. If you're just having direct eye contact as if nothing else is going on, it makes a huge difference.
yeah, absolutely. So we'll speak about that as well. Sorry. Yeah, so we really need to work out two things. We need to work out what is listening and what is speaking. If the data is silently listen, then speak with clarity. So what is listening and what is speaking? Okay, so we're describing listening as to experience another. And we're describing speaking as to aid another to experience you. Listening is to experience another, and speaking is to help the other experience you. Okay. Now there's three modes of listening and one more, which isn't really listening. Okay. So the three modes of listening, we've spoken about this in other contexts before, but this is very important. So the lowest level is not, we're going to explain one lower level afterwards, but the lowest level, the lowest conventional level that is not listening at all is listening with a intent to reply, meaning you're not listening. You're just waiting to speak. Okay, that's a very, very common, maybe the most common form of listening, which really isn't listening, waiting to respond. Okay. Then we've got what's called evaluative listening, which means you're evaluating what they're saying. You're judging it. Now that doesn't mean doesn't mean you're judging it badly at all. Could mean you're judging it very favorably, but you're judging it, you're evaluating it, you're preferring it, you're liking it, disliking it, you're connecting it, you're contrasting it, you're comparing it, etc., etc. In truth, you're not listening. In truth, you're listening to your own mind. Now, this is a giant improvement on waiting to speak, a giant improvement, but it's still not listening. And men know this very deeply, is that when you do this with your wife, yeah, and we all do it with our wife basically all the time, yeah, they hate it. And when they talk to you, when your wife is talking to you about an issue, yeah, it's really, I mean, she just doesn't want your input. She really just doesn't want you to say anything at all. That's taken me years and years to cup, years. And you know what the funny thing is that usually if I just leave it long enough, and it doesn't take very long at all, is my wife just works it out by herself, just talking to me. She'll be like, and this and that. And I suppose I mean, if you could say like that, and then well, so I suppose really it's like that. And I'm just sitting there thinking, wow, I've solved her problem completely. And I didn't do anything. I just sat there quiet and her problem solved. It just went away. But it's the same with it. It's the same with usually nearly, from my experience, most of the time, the answer is within. And if you can just kind of facilitate the other person, give them that air, give them that feeling of space, that safe space. Yeah, then they nearly always solve things themselves, or they just realize that what they're saying is, that the issue is a non-issue. It's really they'll be like, that bit silly, really, isn't it? And you'll be like, you know, maybe, and they got through it themselves. That's how it goes. That's the that is called silent listening. So evaluative listening, when you're having an opinion and you're comparing, contrasting, analyzing, etc., yeah, really you're experiencing your thoughts. Your thoughts are being generated by that person, yeah, but they're your thoughts, and that person does not feel heard. That person does not feel heard. Yeah. So what is real listening? Real listening is silence. Real listening is just an openness. Now, why is it that we don't like to listen? Why is it so scary to actually silently listen?
Because you cease to exist.
Yeah, what's the problem with that?
It's silencing the ego, which is a scary thing because the ego fights for survival. So you're challenging, also you're challenging your own perspectives and views and preconceptions, maybe even your own identity.
So I'm not sure if Jonathan said what the first thing you said, Jonathan, was the same as Yitzi, yeah, which is true, I think. The next thing that you said, I don't know if you meant what I was thinking, or you were just going vital with what Yitzi said. The second thing, well, maybe you meant, is that you become vulnerable to actually being changed.
Yeah, yeah, these are two separate. Yeah.
And that's terrifying. That you're going to let somebody actually change you, that you're prepared to listen without some kind of commentary that is, it's like, when it's what it's like is when you show someone a picture, like when in my house, these sacred soul pictures that I've been making, yeah. So we got big ones in the dining room. The first, and it's just a generic forest. Could be anywhere in the world. It's just that same picture literally probably exists in a million different places. What's the initial reaction when they look at that picture? Where is that? Where is it? And I just say it's there. Because what they're trying to do is kind of own it in a sense. They're trying to fit it into their mind. It's not enough just to look at it. There needs to be my there needs to be me on it. Because if you just look at it in silence, then you become vulnerable. That's called being vulnerable. Silence makes you vulnerable, and that's very scary. That is very scary. Um, and then there's a lower level. The lowest level of listening is not a level of listening at all. It's a contentiousness. It is what our teenage children, how our teenage children listen to us. Basically, you're wrong. No. Before anything will be said, the word no, even before you finish saying what you've said, they haven't heard it. There's no way they'll say no. And they'll try, not just teenage children, but a lot of people try. It's a very common thing that people will try to not understand you. People will try to not understand. So I'm just going to read you a crazy thing from the um, from the Ben Ish Chai, from the Ben Yoyada on Bava Metzia. I think I've read it to you before about Rebbe Zera in the Gemara when Rebbe Zera did 100 fasts, yeah, to forget the Torah that he learned in Babylon, yeah. So I'm going to read you the translation. It's a good translation. Okay. It certainly appears that it's for sure true that Rabbi Zera did not daven. So he didn't pray to forget the essence of the Talmud. It was because Torah's emes, yeah. What he was trying to forget was the method of study. This is because their style of learning Well, basically, the story is so that Rebbe Zera did 100 fasts when he moved from Bavel into Eretz Yisrael because the learning style was different, and he wanted to forget the learning style of Bavel. So when he went to Eretz Yisrael, he'd be able to learn properly. So it says because their learning style with one another, they would argue, and each one would interrupt the other one and challenge him with many questions before his fellow's point is fully clarified. That's amazing. This causes confusion of the mind where one shouts from there and another shouts from there. That idea of challenging someone before they've put their point across. So I had this experience a few months ago when I met with a big Talmud Chacham and I was trying to explain something to him. And what should have taken, let's say, 8 minutes for me to explain, after 20 minutes, I basically gave up. I had said maybe a minute and a half of what I wanted to say, and it took so long because every stage of the journey there was that and that and that and that, and I was just like, oh, just let me get it out, please. Let me just say it, please. And in the end, I just gave up and I left. But that is a very common that's a very common thing where a person will be see now this is the key. Listen to how the Ben Ish Chai goes on. Since he had grown up accustomed to this style of study in Bavel from his youth, and any habit ingrained in a person from childhood is difficult to abandon, he needed to fast and pray for himself that he might forget that particular method of study to which he had become accustomed. Now, listen to this. He desired instead to appreciate the study method of the scholars of the land of Israel, who are gentle with one another in their discussions of halacha. No one interrupts his fellow's words, and if one fellow presents a logical argument, they do not immediately counter it with questions to undermine his point, even if they see difficulties with his words. Rather, they are deliberate and patient in carefully considering words, and on the contrary, they endeavor to support and uphold his argument. Can you imagine that? That when someone's talking to you, you see a fault with what they're saying, but you answer it up in your head. You answer it up so that they can continue to speak. You might not even say anything. You hear what I'm saying? How opposite is that to how opposite is that to our regular way of thinking? But that's a very, very holy way of being. That when they're saying something, you see that it's not 100. If they say something that's pasha sheker, then say it. But if they're saying something that you see a hole in it, but patch up the hole, work it out. Like, well, I suppose you could say like this rabbi over here. I know it's a minority opinion. Okay, fine. Keep going. As opposed to, well, you can't say that because Beis Hillel, it's the exact opposite thing. So this method of listening, well, it's not a method of listening. This like contentiousness, that's the perfect symbol. You just keep hitting a brick wall. It's like every time you say something, it's like, I hear you're right. Not everybody agrees with this. And just please let me, yeah. That's not listening at all. That kind of communication is not communication, and that is destroying the relationship, absolutely destroying the relationship, and probably the other person in the in the process. Now, we've mentioned this before, again in very different contexts, but anybody remembers here the DMN, the default mode network, what that is? So the default mode network is a network of synapses in the brain, which basically create your sense of self. And what they do is, we've said, this is what all the psychedelic drugs are about. They disable that network. But the reason why things become kind of boring, your DMN, the default mode network, is responsible for boredom. Like, why is it that when you go, when someone comes to LA for the first time, they're like, wow, 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 they drive past Sony Studios, like, well, that's Sony Studios, and yeah, that's Paramount, yeah. And you're like, you don't even notice anymore. And if you were to notice, you'd be like, so what? Yeah. Or you go to the Grand Canyon, it'd be the same thing by the Grand Canyon, Lahavdil. By the coastal Lahavdil. Yeah, the same thing. What makes something boring? Why do you get bored by something? Yeah, that's the DMN. The DMN is basically, and it's a survival instinct. It's a survival mechanism, meaning that when you watch a child, you give a baby a plastic cup, yeah? He or she will put it in their mouth, they'll squish it, they'll smush it on their face, they'll chew it, they'll do whatever. They're trying to discover what it is. Now, when the child is 5 years old and you hand him a plastic cup, he doesn't need to do that anymore. Why? Because he's already done the due diligence. He knows that you don't eat a plastic. In fact, he knows what a plastic cup's for. So what's the difference? The difference is that when he looks at this plastic cup now, his DMN is going, like you can imagine, like in Terminator with the pictures, and when you ever see through the eyes of the robot, and you've got this side, and like surrounds things, and the red and the green and all that stuff, yeah, that your DMN is telling you what a cup is, and it's referencing thousands of previous experiences you've had with cups. So you look at the cup and you just know what it is and use it. Same with the Grand Canyon. When you first go there, your DMN it doesn't exist because it's got no frame of reference. There's no reference there, so there's no movie to play. But when you've been there again and again and again and again and again, yeah, all of a sudden you're bored. Why? Because you're watching a home movie. You're not looking at the Grand Canyon anymore. You're watching a home movie. And that is so destructive when that network of synapses, whatever, is firing when you're talking to somebody. You have to try your hardest to be not enamored. What's the word? Enchanted. That's not the right word. That's a cool word as well. Enamored, enchanted,
Enthralled.
Amazed.
amazed. That's good.
Maybe fascinated.
Fascinated is also good. These are all good words, but there's a specific word I have that's not coming to mind. Either way, all of
Enthralled.
the above. So,
Enthralled.
enthralled, maybe that was either way. Just just don't play a movie. Don't play any kind of movie. Just try and be there as still as possible. And that will give the person you're listening to psychological air. And they will feel heard. They will feel, and you're not doing anything. They will feel validated. They will feel loved. They will feel important. They will, and then what happens is all the problems start to dissolve because really that's all the problems that you don't feel validated, you don't feel loved, you don't feel important, you don't feel necessary. Yeah, so that's really most of the problems solved. So that's silence. That builds trust and respect. It diffuses conflict and reduces defensiveness, and it creates an environment of collaboration and of teamwork. This is the skill necessary for same team mindset. Just like just like not first things first. What's it called? Do what matters is the skill necessary to implement know your mission. Silently listen, then speak with clarity is the skill that allows same team mindset to come into from potential into action.
I just have a question.
Sure.
So let's say we all become excellent listeners, which I think it doesn't just understanding what you just said is not enough. I think developing skill will require a lot of practice. But let's say we got there. And now the question is, now we speak, and then we know the person that we're speaking to or with is not a good listener, what's the point? Why even speak?
So that's the second part. Thank you. That's really the second part of this. Speak with clarity. So you have to help them. You have to help them. You have to you have to speak in a way that will help them listen. That's not simple. That is not simple.
What if they don't cooperate?
Okay, well, I mean, you can only do what you can do, but that is your when once you've and I'll tell you that I mean, from my experience, if you genuinely listen to somebody, yeah, really genuinely listen to somebody, then there's a good chance after that that they will become vulnerable. They will allow their defenses down and allow you to listen. Usually, the defensiveness comes when um, when you haven't allowed them. I'm not saying always, for sure. I'm not saying always, but there is a good chance that if you genuinely listen to somebody, that they will then let their defense down, so to speak, and make themselves vulnerable to actually listen to you.
That makes sense. What if I spoke first?
Okay.
So the question is, starting a conversation, maybe that's another skill, right? If I'm the initiator of the conversation.
Okay, say again.
When I initiate a conversation, let's say, I'm the first one to start, and maybe the way I start to initiate conversation matters.
Yeah, sure. I mean, now that's a different subject. That's a different subject. We're talking
Kind of
about when somebody's trying to talk to you. This is the foundation of the relationship. So when you need to say something and they're just sitting there, then you can say it. But there's other rules to that, you know. That would be the second part of this, which would be speak with clarity, which basically means that the foundation of that speaking with clarity means become utterly aware of the fact that this person isn't you. Don't take anything for granted, meaning don't talk in pronouns, don't assume information that they have unless you know them well and you know they have the information. You know, present ideas logically, start from A, go to B, and then end at Z. Don't start at G and then talk about P and then go back to A and then finish with Z. Go make things orderly. Try to speak from their perspective as much as you can, as in you're giving over your words, but set them up for success, that they're not having to unravel what you're saying and repiece it together, that you're being lucid and orderly and clear in your presentation of ideas, and that you know what you're saying, as in don't just speak because you want to speak. Yeah, and a lot of people do that. They just want to make noise. Yeah, that then for sure you shouldn't say anything. But the skill of actually speaking is like what we just said, is really presenting the idea to them on their terms, in their language. You with me?
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Okay. Um, okay. So just as a side point as well, when you're speaking, we could give a whole class on this in itself, but I want to get into the little like the points that we finish up with usually. Is when we're speaking, just remember, this is a huge thing to remember. And I mean, I live like this now. My wife, thank God, is also like we talk about this with each other now. Remember that usually there aren't actually problems. The problem is that you have a certain kind of chemical bouncing around your body right now. It's making you feel a certain way. And now you're looking for things in the world to attach so that you can blame that feeling on those external stimuli. When in fact, it could be that you didn't sleep enough. It could be that you didn't eat enough. It could be that your boss said something horrible to you. It could be that you lost some money, you got a parking ticket. It could be that someone called you a name or said something horrible to you, and your body produced a certain kind of very negative chemical, and you feel ich, blech, you feel horrible. And then you remember, it's because you never listened to me. And now you go in and you start picking on something that your wife did or your husband did or that your kids did or that your parents did or that happened to you, and that becomes the problem, when really that isn't the problem at all. The problem is that 6 hours earlier, yeah, you scratched your car, and that made you feel really ich, and that chemical is still kind of bouncing around, and it came back, and now you link it to certain thinking, and now it's like a downward spiral. Okay, because that negative thinking creates more of that chemical, which creates more of the negative thinking, which creates more of the chemical, etc. And you go down. So be very aware of that. Because if you do want to start, confronting someone with something they've done or something that's going on, yeah, ask yourself, would this be bothering me if I just won 10,000 shekels or $10,000 on the scratch card? Would I really be bothered about this right now? Unlike if I'd broken my leg, yeah, chas v'shalom, and I won $10,000 on a scratch card, that would still bother me. I mean, I'd be happy about the scratch card, but that broken leg would not dissolve. Whereas there are a lot of problems that just dissolve the minute we kind of extract ourselves from the chemical. Or we realize that it's just the chemical. And you should say that. You should say it, by the way. I say this to my wife all the time. I'll say to her, I've got this horrible chemical in me right now, and I feel really angry and like just really hateful. I'll say that. And it really helps. It really, really helps. It would sound mad if somebody came in and heard me saying to my wife, I've got this horrible chemical buzzing around my body right now. And she's like, yeah, yeah, I know what you mean. Okay. So we're gonna let's just we this is how we've been ending these days. Now we're just gonna go through a bunch of kind of practical, very practical tips and tricks, so to speak. But remember, we're not talking. This isn't tips and tricks. This is a deep character tikkun. This is a deep inyan of character. We're not talking about techniques to make people feel listened. We're talking about actually being silent. Yeah, that's to do with the character. But that said, there are a bunch of techniques, and we'll talk about them. Okay, number one, yeah, ignore your phone completely. Completely is in capital letters. Yeah. The minute you cut somebody off your telephone, you have done huge damage to the relationship. You really have. It's terrible. I was saying that I just did that to Yitzi just before, but that was for my son Chaim. I told you Chaim was good. But it was my son Chaim, so you have to prioritize the relationships. But yeah, the phone has to be ignored completely. And you know what's a really good thing to do is the phone rings and you're like, no, you're more important. Put it away. That's a choshev thing. That's a very choshev thing. Okay. Another kind of a different thing is ask them if you understood correctly, and then reiterate what they said to you, and try and say it better than how they said it. If you can do that, if you can say, wait, well, let me get this right. You're saying that because I don't wash up after myself, it makes you feel that I don't care about you because you think that I want you, I don't care about your time because you think that I think that my time is more valuable than your time, and therefore you can do my washing up. I didn't say it very clearly, but if you can articulate what they're saying to you better than how they articulated it, you've done fabulously. That is worth gold. That's amazing. And you should be striving to do that. Whenever you're having a conversation with someone, don't just repeat back to them what they said, but you should try and like AI it in a sense. Like reformulate it, reposture it, and articulate it in a more accurate way than what they did. And then they'll go like, oh, wow, yeah, you got it. That's even could even in a sense be worth more than the silence if you really nail it, really nail it. Okay. Also, there's obviously nodding and going and letting them feel that you're with them and that you're paying attention. Like Michael said, eye contact. Also, remember this is very important. Okay, studies suggest that blank of communication is non-verbal depending on context. What percentage of communication is non-verbal? From what to what? Studies suggest that blank to blank percent of communication is non-verbal. Fill in the blank.
75, 90%.
60 to 90.
Was it? Nathan just nailed it. 70 to 93% of communication is non-verbal. That's amazing. 70 to 93% of communication is non-verbal. Body language, gestures, poses, facial expressions makes up 55%. The tone of voice, intonation, pitch, emphasis, 38%. Actual words used, 7%. That's not true for everyone, by the way. I hope that when we're speaking, and we're giving over deep ideas, it's more like, 95 or 90% information and words. Anyway, okay. If a
Might be a good time for people to come off their cameras for this.
Yeah. Never take notes. Nathan, you're not on. You're on mute.
Oh, sorry. I was saying I was just testing if nonverbal works.
Oh, okay. That's a joke. Nice one. Okay. If applicable, take notes. Yeah, if applicable. Never cut the other person off. Although I do that, I do that occasionally in share. I try very much not to do that, but sometimes I'll say in share, like when I've cut their question, because sometimes people can ramble on for quite a while, and in a share when you've got a whole bunch of other people involved, I'll say, "I'm sorry, do you mind? I'm going to cut you off. I'm sorry, but I think I've understood what you're saying," and then do that. But otherwise, never cut them off. And then a very very important thing, and that the Mishnah says it as well, is do not jump into answer. Let what they said, let there be a gap of space. And again, these are like they are techniques, but they should really be real once you've worked out this inner silence. This should be real. But once they've spoken, hold that silence for a minute. Be there. And that's worth everything. It's horrible. The second worst thing, the worst thing is when someone cuts you off. But the second worst thing is when they immediately answer you. It's so nice when they leave that little gap, just a little gap. It could be a second or two, and they're just like, So I think you could say like this: makes all the difference. No, like it makes all the difference. Okay, and with children, when your children young, especially young children, more young children, but when your young children are speaking to you, and they're not really, they've got nothing to say, they're just talking. Yeah, touch their face when they're talking to you. Put your hand out and touch their face as they're gibbering, as they're just talking. Just touch their face and marvel at them. Just marvel at them. That's what they want, and that's a very important thing to remember, that it's especially prevalent with women, is when your wife talks to you, a lot of the time, that's just her way of having kesher with you. That's just her way of connecting with you. Like the last thing that I could ever imagine doing when I get home from my day is even talking about anything of my day, let alone recounting the whole day. Yeah, it's, we're done and now we're at home and we can get on with this. But most people, especially for the men, that your wife wants to tell you the day. Yeah, but she really doesn't want to tell you about the day. She just wants to connect to you, and that's her ikka way of connecting to you. And so I said this, I posted this on WhatsApp a few weeks ago, is if it's difficult for you at that time and you're really like you haven't got the patience or you whatever it is, you're in a cutness yourself, you can look at it as she's speaking to you as her just saying endlessly, I love you, 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 I love you. That's really that's a really helpful thing to have in mind. If you're in that situation where you're not available to listen, and that does happen. That is that yeah. You have to be real with where you're holding. Um, yeah. Try your hardest to understand. Like when people use pronouns instead of saying names, I can't believe he said this to her, and then she went and did this to him. Yeah. Now you could say, well, who, what? Before you do that, just try and piece it together in your mind, because usually you can work it out. Usually you can work it out, but most of the time we want to try to not understand. That's not good. Um, and Yeah, just as a final interesting thing is I give these for my business in the photography, I give these um like critiques of my students' pictures, yeah. So I speak into the camera with no one there. I just speak into the camera for 15 minutes. I've done now to date, I've probably done around 7,000 critiques. Yeah. So I just, for 15 to 20 minutes. And it's amazing how natural you can just talk to a camera. Be really careful about that because because meaning that just shows you how easy it is to speak to no one. Meaning you're not really, when you're looking at a camera, there's no one there. And you can really naturally, genuinely talk. You have to be careful that that's not how it is with the other person, that they're not a camera, they're not just some kind of thing, that there's a person there. Um, and that is silently listen, then speak with clarity. Very, very important there. Shema tishma'u, Bezrat Hashem. Any questions?
A couple of oh,
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
please. At this point, you have to go first.
I was just it was interesting what you were saying about the chemical and as opposed to the actual problem. So the actual issue and the motivation behind raising the issue, they're two different things, and it's important to recognize it myself. But what about in the other person? What are the clues that it can use to know that it's not about the issue, it's about how the person feels?
Well, from my experience, 9 times out of 10, it's the chemical. 9 times out of 10, there isn't an
Got
issue.
it. Got it. Got it.
What I would suggest in that case is to educate them at a different time.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's not, no, let's not discuss it now.
Nearly always, no, you listen. Don't add fuel to the fire by agreeing with if they they nitpick something about one of your children or something like funny, that's driving them nuts. Don't add fuel to the fire by agreeing with it and going via to and digging into it. You can't, and if you're in a really good place with that person, and that this, if you've got a high level, if you're really in the black in your emotional bank account, you can say to them, well, tell me what's really bothering you. Well, this isn't the
Yep.
issue. What's really the issue? But that you really have to be in a good place with the person. Otherwise, it would
Yep.
just be considered it would just be a chutzpah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just had two comments, two questions. First one is now when I go out to a restaurant with my wife, people like to fight for the good seat. There's a good seat and there's a bad seat at a restaurant. I don't know if you're aware,
But
but the
that's
good
it.
seat is like where you're facing the crowd. You can see the door, people walking in.
The good
It's like
seat
you
in
can.
Israel is where there's not like cold next to the door. Anyway, so go on. I just cut you off. Yeah. So go on. There's a fight for the good seat, and okay.
And then nobody wants the bad seat. But really, this I'm recently I've been trying to sit in the quote unquote bad seat because the bad seat is where your back is to everybody. But
That's the
that's
good
good.
seat.
Exactly. It's not understood, but that is the good seat. That's the joke. The joke is that is the good seat, so you can focus on who you're sitting with. That's number one. And so
Uh,
people should fight for that seat, is what I'm
that's
saying.
a
They
comment.
don't,
That's
but
not a question. That's a comment.
that was a comment.
Yeah,
Second
good.
comment is
Good.
just when you said, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. That's really what your wife is saying. So it is a lot of these scenarios that were you're describing is where you're giving validity to somebody, right? This whole thing is about giving validity to the other person. Why? Because you love them. We're all part of that same organization. So we're doing that. It's the same thing. We're saying to them by listening, it sounds like you're saying, I love you, I love. We're saying to this person, I love you, I love you, I love you. This is why I'm being silent.
Yeah.
My question is, okay, when an idea pops into your head, when someone speaking to you, an idea pops into your head, what are you supposed to do with that idea? I think you commented on it, but I didn't understand. Am I supposed to just answer it myself and move on?
You
Because
mean
you
an
want
I?
openness.
You mean an idea against what they're saying?
Yeah, something that you want to now. Oh, that triggered something in mind. I want to tell him this.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, don't interrupt.
Just
Don't
hold on it.
don't interrupt. I mean, look, if it's essential, then you'll say, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm so sorry to interrupt. But I just have to. If I don't say this, I'm going to forget. It's so important. You could do
Mm.
something like that. But just make sure that you don't. It's insulting when someone turns the conversation in a different direction. You were speaking about X, and then someone throws you a thing about something else, someplace else. That's insulting. That's
Well,
the
it's also a risk.
huh?
Sorry, it's also the risk with that type of listening to wait for your turn to speak. There's a risk of that happening.
I can't say it again, Jonathan. I didn't hear, man.
But there's the risk that could turn to the third type of speaking of listening, not really listening, but you're waiting for the person to finish so you can say what you were thinking. You're not really present.
If you're saying if an idea pops into your head,
Yeah, like an example he gave, it's like you see something, you want to say it. The
yeah.
risk is you could fall into that false type of thing of listening.
So unless it's like a real, like some kind of glorious chiddush in Torah or something that's really valuable, yeah, which usually those kinds of things aren't, then practice the art of just shutting up and letting it fly out your head. And you know what? You might not say it, and that's okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. You know what I'm saying?
Got it. One thing is in the definition, you said that you're supposed to deeply understand others beyond their words, and you used it twice, beyond their words. What did you mean by that?
That was getting to the end of that was what we said at the end. I didn't really explain it there, which was the idea of how much body language is involved. We said 70 to 90% of body language and tone accounts for the person, and only sometimes, as little as 7% the actual words.
Mm.
So appreciating them beyond
Um,
the words means, go understanding the person. That's what it's really about. It's a nice way to finish off here. It's about another human being. It's about another person. That's what you're trying to happen. We'll just say this quickly. That is the difference between a teacher, and I think we said this, I said this recently to someone. That's the difference between a teacher and an information desk. What's the difference between, the guy at Ben Gurion or LAX airport, the information, and a real teacher? The guy at the booth at the airport, he's just giving you information. The teacher's giving you himself. That's that's really what we're doing when we're speaking, is we're giving the other ourself. That's why it was Hashem used speech to create reality. He was giving himself to us, packaged up in letters, but you're really giving yourself to someone when you're speaking, and therefore that means you're really receiving the other when you're listening. You're receiving a person. You're receiving a person, not words. You're receiving a person. That's infinitely more valuable. Okay, chazak v'yamatz.